Hello YouTube, welcome back to my channel. I'm Robina, and today in the low carb kitchen we are going to be making a trim healthy recipe from the Trim Healthy Mama cookbook. It was their first official cookbook that was put out, and the recipe is found on page 296 if you want to go right to it. If you already have it and you've never made this cake is delicious. It is very moist on the inside. It tastes like an ordinary cupcake, nothing unusual about it. It does not taste like a low carb cupcake. Like I said, it's very delicious. My whole family loves it. Even the children eat it and they have no problems. They don't usually say, oh, this tastes like low carb or anything like that. So we're just gonna jump into the recipe. I'll just tell you what I'm doing here and the recipe, and then you can go and do what you wanna do. You can either do this in a mixing bowl or you can do it in your Vitamix, Blendtec. I'm using a Blendtec, or even your KitchenAid mixer. I think when it comes to the zucchini portion of it, because, excuse me, I didn't tell you the name of the recipe. It's the Trim-tastic chocolate zucchini cake. So this is a chocolate cake that has zucchini in the recipe to add more moisture to it. And in the recipe itself, it doesn't say to peel the zucchini. It just has you put the whole thing in there, but I like to peel mine. So I go ahead and I always just peel the green portion off, peel the skin off. Number one, because I feel like the first time I made this with the skin on, that it did leave a certain taste in the cupcakes that we didn't like. And number two, I did not buy this zucchini organic, so it was important to me to go ahead and peel the skin off before I started using it for cooking. So the ingredients for this recipe are: you'll need 1 medium zucchini, 4 large eggs, half a stick of softened butter, and 3/4 cup of Trim Healthy Mama baking blend. If you don't have the baking blend, you can do what I do, which is I have a ratio of 3 parts almond flour to 1 part of coconut flour. I have that mixed together in a big bowl that I keep with the lid on in my pantry. So that's what I'm using for my baking blend, is a mix of coconut flour and almond flour, and I did use 3/4 cup of that mix. The recipe also calls for 3/4 cup of a sweetener, and I'm using powdered erythritol here. This is Anthony's powdered or confectioner erythritol is what I'm using for my sweetener. I also used 2 capfuls of vanilla. The recipe calls for 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract, but I never measure out my vanilla. I just usually use the cap that comes with it, and I put either 1 cap or 2 cap of vanilla depending on how I'm feeling for my recipe. So that's what I do when I bake this cake. It calls for 1 teaspoon of aluminum-free baking powder and 1 teaspoon of baking soda with 2 pinches of a salt. And then the recipe calls for 4 tablespoons of unsweetened cocoa. I ended up using 1/3 cup of cocoa. And for the chocolate part of this, you're putting the cocoa powder in the recipe, but then the recipe calls for using a 85% dark chocolate or some kind of dark chocolate chips that don't have sweetener in it. For that portion, it's a 1/3 cup. So you're welcome to use the 1/3 cup of whatever low glycemic, keto, low carb, sugar-free, either baking chocolate bark or chocolate chips. What I did for mine is I'm using 78% of chocolate squares that I had in my pantry, and I will link that down below. I'm going to link the almond flour that I buy, the sweetener that I buy, and the chocolate that I use for this recipe. So I'll link a few things down below. The other things, they're just ordinary things like the baking soda, baking powder that you can find anywhere. But if you want specifics on what I have in my kitchen, those will be in the comments. After I got all of my ingredients in here, what I like to do when I use any sort of recipe for baking in my blender, I like to put my wettest ingredients on the bottom so they create motion in the blender, and then put my drier ingredients on top of those. That way when the blender is blending, it will immerse everything kind of from the top and from the outside to the bottom and to the center. That just helps everything get really smooth and really, really finely blended so that it creates a nice texture. This will help you with creating an even texture when it comes to baking low carb. If you sift your almond flour, which I have said time and time again in my low carb videos, you have to sift that almond flour. And then also, if you have a high power blender, that also creates a really smooth tasting dish when it comes to cooking desserts low carb. When I blended mine, I did it 2 or 3 times just to make sure everything was really, really smooth. I wanted this to have good flavor. I wanted it to taste like ordinary cupcakes. So that's what I did, and I'm lining my cupcake pan with cupcake liners so that nothing sticks. And once your blender is done or you're done mixing it, everything's really smooth, I just scrape down the sides to make sure I have all of my material together. And then I go ahead and pour it into my cupcake liners, and into the oven it goes. It's 350 degrees for 30 minutes is what I baked mine at. I have a gas oven, so be sure that you just know your oven, whether it's a hotter oven or a cooler oven, to go by the temperature. Mine baked, like I said, at 350 for 30 minutes. All right, let's go over the super easy frosting that was made for this cake. It is 1/2 cup of heavy whipping cream, 2 tablespoons of the unsweetened cocoa powder, plus 3.5 teaspoons of your sweetener, and a dash of vanilla extract. Super duper easy. I'm getting the kids involved here, getting their help, so that way, I think when you get kids involved in the kitchen, it makes them want to eat the final product, because they know that they have worked hard to help mama make this dish. So if you have kids and you want to get them involved, have them push the blender button, have them do something. They would love to do it. Even though it's a mess, just go ahead and have them help.
It looks like pink too.
It does not look like it.
It does. It looks like a big Mama. Mama.
Once you get done making your frosting, I recommend that you let it chill in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes and then come back and ice your cupcakes. What I did was just one messy swipe of the icing, and then I put the rest of the icing into a piping bag, and I piped it onto the cupcakes. This made sure all of the cupcakes had some frosting on it, because this recipe is actually for you to do a 8x8 cake, but we decided to do it in cupcakes because I feel like that's easier with kids. So the frosting could have been doubled if you're doing 12 cupcakes. I recommend that you just go ahead and double the frosting so that it works, because I was feeling stretched to make sure every single one of them had a little bit of frosting and a little bit of decoration on them. I wish that I had more, because then I could have made it more decorative and more fun, but you know, these cupcakes are just for our family. They're not for a bake sale or anything like that, although they were very delicious, and I think they would do very well at a bake sale, but they just were not as pleasing to the eye for a bake sale or for something outside the home. But just for our family, for a nice treat, they worked very well, and I got Aria's approval. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more low carb recipes and more curly hair care. And I will see you guys in the next one. Pass this video on to someone who loves baking and is trying out keto, low carb, or trim healthy mama. I will talk to you guys in the next one.